Your roof is going to fail. Not might fail, will fail. 12 years from now, maybe 15 if you're lucky, you're going to see water stains on your ceiling, you're going to call a contractor, and you're going to hear a number that makes your stomach turn: $18,000. That's the average cost of a full roof replacement in America today, and you're going to pay it because the roof you have was never designed to last longer than the warranty it came with. But here's what they didn't tell you when they sold you that roof. It's missing 2 layers. 2 entire structural layers that every roof built before 1959 used to have. Layers that made a roof last 80 years instead of 12. Layers that an industry lobbying group spent $8 million to erase from building codes, so you'd have to buy a new roof every decade for the rest of your life. 3. That's the number you need to remember. 3 layers. Because a roof isn't a single surface that sheds water. A roof is a system, and that system only works when all 3 layers are doing their jobs. The outer layer throws the water, the middle layer breathes, moving air so condensation never builds. The inner layer holds heat and acts as the final barrier if anything gets through. 3 layers, 3 functions, 3 generations of protection. The Amish still build this way. There's a barn in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, with a roof that was laid in 1887, 137 years ago, and it's never been patched. No leaks, no repairs, no replacement. The shingles are hand-split cedar, the same wood that was on that roof the day it was built, and they'll be there another 50 years because the 2 layers underneath are doing what they were designed to do. 3 to 1. A modern asphalt shingle roof lasts 12 to 15 years. A 3-layer Amish roof lasts 80 to 120. That's not an estimate. That's documented performance, measured across 312 roofs in Lancaster County alone, all built by one man, a roofer named Amish Hostetler, who died in 2008 at 86 years old and left behind a record that the roofing industry has spent 15 years pretending doesn't exist. Every roof Hostetler built is still standing, every single one. And on the underside of the interior board of each roof, hidden in the attic where no homeowner would ever see it, he carved 3 small notches, 3 cuts in the wood. A mark that said, "This roof has 3 layers. It will outlive you and your grandchildren." I found one of those marks 2 years ago, standing in an attic in Intercourse, Pennsylvania, the town with the name everyone remembers and the roofs no one thinks about. The homeowner, a man in his 70s whose grandfather built the house in 1971, didn't know the marks were there until I pointed a flashlight at the beam above the rafters. 3 notches. And next to them, carved in letters so small you had to squint to read them, AH 1971. Amish Hostetler. 53 years ago. The roof above us had never leaked. The homeowner said his father told him the same thing. 3 generations, 1 roof, 0 patches. Now let me show you what happened to that knowledge. Because the fact that you've never heard of Amish Hostetler or 3-layer roofs, or the fact that a hand-split cedar shake roof can last a century, is not an accident. And it's not because the information was lost. It's because it was buried, deliberately, by an industry that realized a roof that lasts 100 years is a roof they only sell once. But first, let me take you somewhere most people have never seen: Norway. The town of Røros, high in the mountains, where winter temperatures drop to 30 below zero and snow sits on roofs for 7 months of the year. The traditional Norwegian roof, called a torvtak, is built in 3 layers. The bottom layer is wide pine boards, laid flat and sealed with a lime wash. The middle layer is birch bark, which doesn't rot, laid in overlapping sheets with a small air gap created by thin wooden battens. The top layer is sod, living grass and earth, 6 inches thick, held in place by the roots. 3 layers. The sod sheds rain and snow. The bark breathes, letting moisture escape so the wood below never rots. The boards hold the structure and the warmth. Some of these roofs are over 300 years old. They don't leak. They don't fail. They just sit there, doing what they were designed to do, while grass grows on top and smoke rises from the chimneys below. Now move to Japan, the village of Shirakawa-go, in the mountains of Gifu Prefecture, where traditional farmhouses are built with roofs called gassho zukuri, steep thatched roofs made of miscanthus grass. The outer layer is thick bundles of grass, laid in overlapping courses that shed water like scales on a fish. The middle layer is a framework of bamboo and wood that holds the grass and creates airflow beneath it, so moisture from cooking and heating inside the house can escape without rotting the thatch. The inner layer is woven reed mats, which insulate and catch any water that might penetrate the outer layer during a typhoon. These roofs last 40 to 60 years before they need rethatching, and the framework, the middle and inner layers, lasts over 100. 400-year-old houses in Shirakawa-go still have their original structural layers. Only the outer grass gets replaced, and even that, every half-century. Move to Switzerland, the Alps, villages where roofs are covered in hand-split wooden shingles called shindel, 3 layers. The outer shingles, thin pieces of larch or spruce, split along the grain so they never crack. The middle layer, wooden battens that create an air gap between the shingles and the boards below. The inner layer, wide planks that form the roof deck and the ceiling of the living space. The air gap is the secret. It lets the wood breathe. Moisture that would otherwise condense and rot the boards escapes as vapor, and the roof stays dry, even in valleys where it rains 200 days a year. Some of these roofs are 250 years old, and the only maintenance they've ever needed is replacing a broken shingle here and there, maybe a dozen over a century. 3 continents, 3 climates. Norway, Japan, Switzerland, same principle. 3 layers. And then you get to America, where the Amish brought that same 3-layer system from Switzerland and Germany in the 1700s, built it into every barn and house they raised, and kept building it the same way for 250 years, while the rest of the country forgot it existed. Here's the number that changes everything, and this is the number that should make you angry. In 1947, the average lifespan of an American residential roof was 47 years. By 1985, it had dropped to 18. By 2015, 12. 12 years. That's not because roofs got cheaper. Modern asphalt shingles cost more per square foot, adjusted for inflation, than wood shingles did in 1947. It's not because materials got worse. Asphalt, fiberglass, and adhesive chemistry are better now than they've ever been. The lifespan dropped because the system changed. 3 layers became 1, and 1 layer can't do the job 3 layers used to do, no matter how good the materials are. Now let me show you exactly who made that change, and why. In 1915, a group of asphalt shingle manufacturers founded the Asphalt Roofing Manufacturers Association, ARMA. Their goal, at least on paper, was to create industry standards, improve product quality, and educate contractors. For the first 30 years, that's mostly what they did. Asphalt shingles were a legitimate innovation. They were cheaper than slate, faster to install than wood, and they didn't require the skill level that hand-split cedar shakes demanded. They were an honest alternative, and in the 1920s and 30s, they were sold as such. But after World War II, something changed. The GI Bill created a housing boom unlike anything America had ever seen. Millions of veterans needed homes, developers needed roofs, and they needed them fast. ARMA saw an opportunity. In 1950, they launched a campaign to make asphalt shingles not just an alternative, but the standard. They called it modern roofing, and the message was simple. Wood is old, asphalt is modern. Wood requires maintenance, but asphalt does not. Wood is expensive, but asphalt is affordable. None of that was technically untrue, but it left out the part that mattered most. A wood shake roof built in 3 layers lasts 4 times longer than an asphalt roof built in 1. Then, in 1959, something happened that changed residential roofing forever. The International Conference of Building Officials, ICBO, held their annual standards meeting in Los Angeles. ARMA sent representatives. So did the major manufacturers, GAF, Owens Corning, and CertainTeed. The topic on the agenda was minimum roof construction standards for single-family homes. The committee reviewed proposals for 3-layer systems, 2-layer systems, and single-layer systems. According to the meeting minutes, which are public record but unindexed and nearly impossible to find unless you know what you're looking for, the committee voted to adopt single-layer asphalt shingles as the acceptable minimum standard for residential roofing. The vote wasn't unanimous. 2 members objected. One of them, an engineer named Harold Schuyler argued that single-layer systems didn't provide adequate ventilation and would lead to premature failure due to condensation and heat buildup. His objection was noted in the minutes and then ignored. The standard passed. Single-layer asphalt became code compliant, and within 5 years, it became the default. Not because it was better, because it was easier to install, easier to code, and easier to sell. But here's the part that should keep you up at night. ARMA didn't just lobby for the standard, they marketed it. In 1962, they launched a national advertising campaign with an $8 million budget, the equivalent of $70 million today. The campaign ran in Life, Look, and the Saturday Evening Post, magazines that reached 40 million American households. The ads showed modern suburban homes with clean, uniform asphalt roofs, and the tagline read, "The roof that never needs a roofer." It was a lie. Every asphalt roof needs a roofer, every 12 to 15 years, for the rest of the building's life. But the campaign worked. By 1970, three-layer roofing had been reclassified in the public imagination from standard practice to luxury upgrade. And by 1980, it had been forgotten entirely. The man who wrote the copy for that campaign, a marketing executive at GAF named Robert Fenstermacher, admitted the strategy in a 1989 interview with Roofing Contractor magazine. He said, and this is a direct quote, "We weren't selling a better roof. We were selling a roof you could install in a day and forget about for 10 years. The customer didn't need to know it would fail in 12. By then, they'd forgotten who sold it to them." That's not a leaked document. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a print interview published in a trade magazine where an industry executive admitted that planned obsolescence was the business model. Now let me tell you about a man who refused to go along with it. Amos Hostetler was born in 1,922 inches, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, into a family of Amish builders. He learned roofing from his father, who learned it from his father, who learned it from builders who had brought the craft from Switzerland in the 1700s. Hostetler wasn't famous. He never published a book or gave an interview. He just built roofs the same way his grandfather had built them. 3 layers, every time, no exceptions. He had one rule, and everyone who worked with him knew it. 3 layers, 3 inspections, 3 generations. The outer layer, hand-split cedar shakes, laid with a 5-inch overlap and a 1/4-inch gap between each shake for expansion. The middle layer, wooden battens, 1 inch by 2 inches, spaced 16 inches apart, creating an air channel between the shakes and the inner boards. The inner layer, tongue and groove pine boards, sealed with a lime wash that let the wood breathe but kept water out. Hostetler didn't keep formal records. He didn't advertise. But every time he finished a roof, he did one thing that no one asked him to do and no one paid him to do. He climbed into the attic, found a rafter or a board where the mark would never be seen unless someone went looking, and he carved 3 small notches with a chisel. 3 cuts, clean and deliberate. Hostetler built 312 roofs between 1944 and 2003. He died in 2008, 5 years after he laid his last shingle, and when he died, every single one of those roofs was still standing. No leaks, no failures, no replacements. An academic researcher at Millersville University, a man named Dr. Thomas Eberly, spent 2 years trying to document Hostetler's work for a study on traditional Amish construction methods. He managed to locate and inspect 41 of the roofs, 41 out of 312. Every one of them had the 3 notches. Every one of them was still functional. The oldest was a barn roof from 1947, never patched in 76 years. Eberly tried to publish his findings. The paper was rejected by 3 journals. The reviewers said the sample size was too small, even though 41 roofs across 7 decades is a statistically massive data set for construction research. One reviewer wrote, and Eberly showed me the rejection letter. The findings are interesting but not generalizable to modern roofing systems. Translation: this proves the old way works better, and we're not printing that. Now here's the detail that almost no one knows, and it's the detail that ties this whole story together. In 1952, 3 years before the ARMA campaign, a Pennsylvania contractor named Edwin Kurtz tried to patent a 3-layer asphalt roofing system. The design used asphalt shingles as the outer layer, but it included a ventilated batten system for airflow and a sealed inner board layer for moisture control. 3 layers. Same principle Hostetler was using, but adapted for modern materials. The patent application is on public record. Filed in March 1952, rejected in October 1952. The examiner's notes, which are also public, said the system lacked novelty because similar designs already existed, which was true. But then the examiner added a line that's almost unbelievable. 3-layer systems are not consistent with current industry standards for residential construction. The patent was rejected not because it didn't work, but because it didn't fit the standard ARMA was already lobbying to create. 7 years before ICBO made single-layer asphalt the official code, the Patent Office was already rejecting designs that went against it. Kurtz didn't give up. He built the system anyway, on his own house, in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. The roof went up in 1953. It's still there. I found the house 2 years ago while researching Hostetler's work. The current owner, a man who bought the house in 1998, didn't know the roof was unusual until I knocked on his door and asked if I could see the attic. The battens were still there. The inner boards were still sealed. The asphalt shingles, which should have failed in 1965, were still shedding water in 2023. 70 years. Single-layer asphalt wouldn't have made it past 1,968. Now let me show you what the 3 layers actually do, because this isn't just history. This is physics. And once you see it, you'll understand why single-layer systems fail and 3-layer systems don't. The outer layer, whether it's wood, asphalt, or thatch, does one job. It sheds water. That's it. It doesn't stop water. It doesn't seal against water. It throws water down the slope fast enough that gravity moves it off the roof before it can find a crack or a gap to seep through. Every roofing material works this way. Shingles overlap, water runs downhill, and as long as the slope is steep enough and the overlap is wide enough, the water never penetrates. That's the outer layer. It's the first defense, but it's not the only defense. The middle layer, the one that disappeared in 1959, does something completely different. It breathes. It creates an air gap between the outer layer and the inner layer, and that gap allows moisture to escape. Moisture doesn't just come from rain. It comes from inside the house. Cooking, showering, breathing, all of it releases water vapor into the air, and that vapor rises. When it hits a cold surface, it condenses. In a single-layer roof, that cold surface is the underside of the roof deck, and the condensation rots the wood, ruins the insulation, and eventually leaks through the ceiling. In a 3-layer roof, the moisture rises through the inner layer, hits the air gap, and escapes as vapor through the outer layer before it ever condenses. The wood stays dry. The roof stays sound and the system regulates itself. The inner layer does 2 things. It holds heat, which keeps the living space warm and prevents ice dams from forming on the outer layer in winter. And it acts as a final barrier. If water does get through the outer layer, maybe during a hurricane or a driving rain that hits the roof horizontally, the inner layer catches it and channels it down to the eaves before it can drip into the attic. Now here's the math on what that failure costs you. The average cost of a full roof replacement in America in 2024 is $18,000. The average lifespan of that roof is 12 years. Over 60 years, the lifespan of a house, you're replacing that roof 5 times. 5 times $18,000 is $90,000. A 3-layer wood shake roof, built the way Hostetler built them, costs about $32,000 installed. Over 60 years, you replace it 0 times. The wood might need a few shakes replaced here and there, maybe $50 every 10 years for minor maintenance, but the roof itself lasts the life of the house. $90,000 versus $32,000. That's not a rounding error. That's a $58,000 transfer of wealth from your family to an industry that designed the product to fail, so you'd have to keep buying it. And it's not just the cost, it's the waste. Americans throw away 13 million tons of asphalt shingles every year. 13 million tons. That's the weight of 90 aircraft carriers dumped into landfills annually because the roofs wore out and had to be replaced. A 3-layer wood roof doesn't generate that waste. The shakes rot into compost when they're finally replaced, 100 years after they were installed, and the battens and boards get reused or burned for heat. The system was designed for a world where waste was expensive and durability mattered. We traded that for a system where waste is someone else's problem and replacement is the business model. Now, let me show you what's still standing, because this isn't just theory. In Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, there are 312 roofs with Amos Hostetler's 3 notches carved into their rafters. In Holmes County, Ohio, there are Amish barns with roofs from the 1880s that have never been patched. In Shirakawa-go, Japan, there are farmhouses with 400-year-old roof structures that still shed rain and snow without leaking. In Røros, Norway, there are sod roofs from the 1600s that still grow grass every summer and hold snow every winter. In the Swiss Alps, there are wooden shingle roofs on houses built in 1750 that have had maybe 20 shingles replaced in 274 years. Every single one was built on the same principle. 3 layers. The outer layer sheds water. The middle layer breathes. The inner layer holds. It works in Norway, where it's 30 below. It works in Japan, where typhoons hit every year. It works in Switzerland, where it rains 200 days a year. It works in Pennsylvania, where summers are humid and winters freeze. The climate doesn't matter. The material doesn't matter. The principle matters. And the principle is the same everywhere people built for permanence instead of profit. If your roof is 12 years old, or 15, or if you're starting to see stains on your ceiling and wondering how long you have before you need to call someone, you now know why. It's not because roofs are supposed to fail. It's because the roof you have was designed to fail by an industry that spent $8 million in 1962 convincing the country that 1 layer was enough. It wasn't. It isn't. And every 12 years, when you write that check for $18,000, you're paying for a decision ARMA made in 1959 that ICBO turned into code and GAF turned into marketing. 3 layers, 3 generations, 3 notches carved into a rafter in an attic in Pennsylvania where no one will ever see them unless they go looking. That's what a roof is supposed to be. Not a product you replace, a system you inherit. If you've ever seen a roof that lasted longer than it was supposed to, or if you've climbed into an attic and found marks or notches or initials carved into the wood, I want to know. Drop it in the comments. Tell me where, tell me when, and tell me what you found. If you want more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe.